So what we're looking at here is possibly not a sensible business decision. However, I was going through some of my old stuff and I found a load of kits and things, scratch built stuff that I'd done when I was 20, so a good few years ago. And coincidentally, these Heljan O2s popped up at a more sensible price. I would have dearly loved to have a loco like this when I was doing linear modelling. And even today, there are no real freight locos in the range. I think Hornby have done the Q6 and the Bachmann ROD 04s, but there's huge holes in the record. There's a lot of passenger locos, but not so much for the bread and butter work. So back in the 90s and 2000s, when I was collecting LNER 00 at quite a rate, there was also a thing in advertising, the blind taste test, and if ever there was a model that needed it, it was this, because there's so much counting against it before you even open the box. The first run was about 10 years ago and it was just a catastrophe. Then 2 or 3 years ago, Heljan revisited the project and salvaged what they could from the tools. They addressed, I would say, about 80% of the problems. But fundamentally, the biggest problem is the sales price that they were asking for it. I am not party to the accounts, so I don't know how fair that price was. But it was big, and I think it sparked off a whole load of reviews based on value for money. Now the price has come down, so I think it puts the model into an area where some of that concern goes away. However, there are still things to address on the locos, and most of the reviews have listed a number of things that they didn't like. So it is my aim to go through and address them properly. So these days I run a shop, so these videos have to reflect that. At the end of the day, we only exist to sell. Digging around in my old collection, I found the only other available O2 on the market. It's a new cast kit and I abandoned it 30 years ago. This is the instructions here. So it's a world away from the best model kits. It's a craftsman's kit. It basically tells you that you're not talented enough to do it. Kits of the time could be quite variable. This one was fairly decent and it did come with wheels, motors and gearboxes, but the majority you had to source all that yourself. You are also entirely left on your own to source engineering solutions to things like close coupling and going round corners. It's a very rigid chassis. The chances are this will not go round anything but massive curves, scale curves even. It's also full of filler, just trying to flatten the sides for paint. And yes, I just ran out of time, tools and talent. To get it to that kind of paint standard would have taken a miracle. So that's what's available if you wanted an O2. This is not excusing Heljan. It is more laying the groundwork for what this means. Right, before I took the decision to pick these up, even heavily discounted, I did watch the reviews again, and there's about 4 of them. 2 of them were, like me, they're kind of shops and retail, so they weren't going to point out things that weren't going to sell the Loco, and 2 of them were brutal. And I think a lot of that brutality stemmed from the high price point. However, there are some silly decisions. There's little bite marks on the chimney. You can't see, actually, to be honest, from normal viewing distances, but when you photograph them, you'll see them. And it's the mould gates. Who designed the mould to put the mould gates on the most detailed part? I have no idea. But we have been able to tidy it up. So that one is tidied. The next issue is the cab, which is loose, and it turns out there is a reason for it being loose, so 2 things need to be fixed to tighten it up. You can see this gap at the back as well, it's not parallel. Again, I have tightened up the cab and addressed the drawbar, which is the reason why it's not tight. One of them is a really silly one, and Heljan really could have dealt with this. Just the swallowtails on their couplings are really hard to compress. So I have taken a razor saw and increased the slot so that they will compress. That's a silly one, but it does result in damage to the back if you're trying to force them in. The footplate partly is because it's not tight. I hear the criticisms that it's a plastic part. I don't actually think it would have been much better if they'd done it out of metal. It would have just been more expensive. It's a really thin part with these S-bit bends in it. There's every chance it was going to take knocks in transit or through heat expansion. You get slightly different expansion of different materials on the model, and they will expand at different rates, and I have seen footplates bow up because of that. So that's not anything I can address, but cosmetically it's there on the real thing. It is just a mudguard. It would have been out of thin steel sheet, so not the end of the world. And the running actually can be improved. I have lubricated the crank pins and things, and it does genuinely improve when you put a chip in it as well. The trouble is that you've got this long rod. If all 4 axles aren't 100% perfectly quartered, then you get binding. The flywheel smooths it right out when it's at high speed, but there's no real flywheel effect when you're crawling along. At standard running speeds, I don't think it's a problem, but it can improve the lower speed a little bit, particularly with the chip where you've got load control. So yeah, it's very much a salvageable project, and that was my opinion, so I ordered them. So another area that was a slight annoyance, particularly in an all black Loco, is the pickup contact strips. They have darkened them down, but they still have that silver shine to them, which looks unnatural on the Loco, so I have painted them on the versions I'll do. Really, from most viewing angles you can't see it, but when you are level with it, it starts popping out at you. And because it's something that they complained about before, it's something I felt I needed to address. Almost forgot this one. This is a really funny one. So you can see on top of the dome there, it's the water collection dome. There are some marks. And what that is the drill bit of the mill. It has gone too far into the tooling, It's a bit careless, whatever's happened, it's moved, it's not done a clean cutting path, and it's left that horrible mark. That really should have been spotted and repaired. Either the tool repaired, or when it was off the loco, they could have been smoothed out before the painting process. So I have addressed that where necessary. It's a small thing, but once you see it there, it's just there. It looks awful. So smoothing the top and repainting solved that problem as well. Okay, so one of the reasons the screw is loose here is to give the chassis flexibility. It's about a 1 in 15 gradient there. Right, let me tighten the screw and show you what happens. Okay, so the cab looks a little bit better, but it's introduced a new problem. It's actually lifting the loco between the front pony and the back. So yes, it's not going to get over one of these gradients like that. We can fix that. I do need to fully set the cab, but I have now done the drawbar, so it's tightened right up and it's not causing the loco to be inflexible. So this is a small detail, but it kind of destroys the illusion of the model. It's this step inside the chimney, and on this one I've taken it out. Again, it's just small things that make it look like a toy. Okay, from all of the reviews, the haulage capacity of these locos is beautiful. The only complaint is a bit of binding at very slow speed. You can see it there. So this is under analog control. And it's just because you've got these long rods and you're expecting, you know, aerospace tolerances on the crankpin bearings. Now I've lubricated the bearings. The flywheel doesn't really have much effect at this speed, so as soon as you get it into a reasonable speed, the flywheel will smooth it all out. And the crawl is a nice sort of mechanical test, but it's not really realistic to how these locos are going to be used. So that's on analog power. So I've now fitted a Lentz DCC chip. It's literally 2 screws, one at the front and one at the back, and the top comes off. The blanking plate comes out and it sits in the loco that way round. The pins go up through the board into the black thing. So you actually just do the same with the chip. The chip's laid out in a similar manner. Lentz are a fully DCC NMRA compliant decoder and supports all the features, so 9,999 addresses, 28 and 128 speed steps. It also supports Railcom and ABC braking. Right, that's a spiel. So at the crawl, the decoder uses a system called back EMF, so it's monitoring the load coming back, and it can smooth out any binding in the mechanism. It's a really nice motor in this. So really, the mechanism has nothing wrong with it. The loco is geared to the operating speed. It is, after all, a freight loco. It's designed for haul 80 wagons. A lot of those wagons don't have continuous braking, so the maximum speed of a coal train isn't going to be that high. I could look it up, but I've forgotten to do that. Okay, so we're back to analog control. Just test it again on the hump. There isn't a standardised test for locos, maybe there should be, to what transitions they should be able to cope with. But I think that's just a fair demonstration of what I think is acceptable. Obviously it wasn't acceptable before. So yeah, I think we are at a point where it is ready. I'm just going to do a little bit of a reality check. So a couple of the reviews went hard in on what they thought the specification for this model should be. So all metal body, metal running plate. So I found the closest equivalent in the shop. So this is Juif, made by Hornby. It's a French 280, so very much equivalent in terms of specification, perhaps a little bit more complexity. It has got metal tender, metal boiler, metal running plate. Now the recommended retail price for this is £327, so £100 more than the Heljan was originally before it was heavily discounted. We sell it at £289. So it has got lights, so it has got a little bit more in terms of features. Right, there are actually two versions of the Great Northern Cab that Heljan have tooled up. On this one, the windows go all the way down past the washout plugs, and on this one the windows are cut above the washout plugs. It's a small difference. I don't know if it's the actual height and profile of the cab as well. So this one has the same cab as the grey versions that were reviewed, and it has the same problem, and it just shows a project running out of money because bits were rushed. So the tooling for the windows was never polished. I've actually tried to clear coat it to fix it, but no, it's, you know, it needs to be cut back and polished. So what I've actually done is made new acetate windows for it. These ones will be in the parts bag. It's a real shame, but it does show a company that was under stress at the time, offering versions. You know, probably two locos got that cab, so they probably just went, yeah, we're not spending any more money on the tool. Although these were entirely freight locos, there was one interesting incident, and it involves this loco 63933. In 1950, Ladas was pulling the Yorkshire Pullman, and one of the main rods snapped at 70 miles an hour. They were incredibly fortunate in that it snapped at a point that it just hit the top of the sleepers. It didn't dig in. So the train was safely stopped, although the track was quite seriously damaged. 63933 was on a freight train nearby and was used to recover the Pullman coaches, get them back to whether they could be picked up by another locomotive. So a very rare incident, but an interesting bit of history. Okay, so the Heljan manual says that the minimum radius is 438mm. I've set up some Roco 419 radius curves here. So let's just test it out. Right, let's set a speed, draw away. Up she goes. So my controller is quite close by, so it's only about a metre away from this curve, so the Loco is getting the best power feed. None of this is particularly scientific, but I'm not seeing the dramatic slowdowns that one of the reviewers was seeing. Maybe a little bit of slowing down there. But of course, yes, there is increased resistance as the flanges dig in. So in the spirit of experimentation, I've actually set up some radius 1 360mm radius curves. Let's back her up so we can get some speed. Not doing it at maximum speed, that would be silly, but surprisingly, it manages. It is a bit tight, so I would follow the manufacturer's recommendations of radius 2. But really, not bad at all. And again, not that much slowing down when it hits the radius. So the Roco track I'm using is code 83, so whether the code 100 would be different, I don't know. Another experiment for another time. I feel successful. So one thing of note is if you do use the cosmetic screw link couplings, actually glue them out of the way so that they're not hanging down and that they don't swing back, because they can and will catch the pony truck as it goes through corners. So what I've done is just glue it at the top so it can't swing down. So why am I doing this? Well, it is a question I ask myself quite regularly. Firstly, I feel it's quite an important locomotive. It's a very good looking locomotive. You've got those simple Great Northern lines. Obviously it is a Gresley Loco and it has his 3-cylinder conjugated gear. So there are direct links to the A4s and the A3s and so on. It is also an underdog. It is a Loco that you wouldn't normally expect to see modelled at all. So I applaud Heljan's bravery of picking the subject. It was also an interesting challenge. It is summer, so things are slow at this time. So it was very enjoyable to do this. Heljan really needed to understand the significance of the shouldered screw, as one of the reviewers pointed out. One on the pony truck, one on the front of the drawbar, and one on the rear of the drawbar. They would have cost literally pennies for each Loco, and they would have solved the whole issue. Well, not a whole issue. A decent quality control department would have also helped. So mechanically, it's all been sorted. Actually, you know, just oiling them. So oiling the crank pins, oiling the slide bars. helps. And then there's the cosmetic work, so fixing the water dome, which is just, you know, ridiculous really. And a few things that I've done myself, like finishing off the blackening of the wheel pickups. That wasn't really necessary, but I liked the idea of it. And generally going round them and checking for any blemishes. The cabs were really nicely done. The coal, obviously, good idea. In general, the design was pretty good. I know reviewers will dispute it, but what they wanted to do was keep the air gap underneath the boiler. So if I turn this round, you can see through underneath like the real Loco. It was designed long before painting all the inner workings red became a thing. So yeah, and that would have required quite a heavy redesign to do. Would have been nice to have a little splash of colour under there. Not the end of the world. So this is also a bit of a farewell. Heljan is definitely gone in terms of the independent trade. The projects out there are liquidation stock, as well as ongoing projects in the factory that were being tidied up. In future, some of the locos will be run, but I don't think the O2 will be on that list, which is a shame, because actually it's not as terrible as it has been portrayed. It is an easy target for engagement, given the history of Heljan steam locos, particularly in 00. It's not as terrible as people have shown it. It needed a little bit of care and attention, it needed quality control. But, yeah, no, for anyone that's prepared to do them, they are really decent models. And at a much better price than previous advertised. We can go into a conversation about comparing prices on the continent. That I'll leave for another time. I still think that the British market is actually quite lucky.